Hi, I'm Kate Hannum. I'm the Customer Success Manager at Zinc Learning Labs. I'm going to show you around Zinc Reading Labs today. Thank you for joining me, and make sure to send me any questions afterwards if I forget something or if something else comes up. So let's start by looking at how you navigate Zinc. There are a couple different ways to do it. One important thing to remember is that this dashboard button drops down into a menu. This is a great way, really easy way to navigate Zinc. If you're on any of these other pages and you want to go back to the home page, you can also always click this leaf to get you back to the home page. Our home page also has some methods of navigation. So first of all, our What's New page includes anything that we really want to communicate to our community of teachers, any tips and tricks, or newly added articles or other content on the site. We usually add a couple articles about every week. So that's where to keep an eye out for those. We have recommendations from other teachers. And then if you scroll down, you can see a nice little preview of all of the different activities that we have on Zinc. So we have articles. All of our articles are actually hosted on websites throughout the internet. They are authentic texts, meaning that they're real published works. We think it's really important that students are reading authentic texts because we know it improves their writing and we know it can be much, much more engaging for them. And we really do want them to love reading. So that's why we've got authentic texts as our articles. Close reading exercises are a really cool thing where we have students take a look at short excerpts from texts and then have a video tutor kind of walk them through a close reading of the text and responding to their ideas as well. So we'll take a look at one of those later. Vocabulary is an awesome thing that we've got on Zinc. We have thousands of words in our library and some games for students to play so that they can really learn those vocabulary words on a long-term basis. You know, we all grew up getting that vocab list on Monday, taking a quiz on Friday, and forgetting those words by Saturday. And that is not the idea here at Zinc. So I'll give you some more information on that later. Our placement tests are fantastic. They take about 20 to 40 minutes to complete for students. There are a series of excerpts with short multiple choice questions after them. You'll see that placement tests come in two different levels, levels 1 through 4 and levels 1 through 7. Levels 1 through 4 is basically a middle school test. 1 through 7 will include some of those higher readers, levels 5, 6, 7 in high school. That said, even if you assign levels 1 through 7 placement test to your sixth grader, you don't need to worry about them suffering through all of these like upper high school level texts. If the placement test senses that they're doing poorly on it, it'll just end early. So that's a good thing for people to know about. So back to the assign page, we've got our placement tests. Students will receive a level on their placement tests between 1 and 7. Here's a breakdown of our levels. So level 1 is roughly 4th to 5th, 2, 6th to 8th, 3 is a stretch for middle schoolers, 9th and 10th is level 4, 11th and 12th, 5, 6 is those really accelerated high school readers, and then 7 is college level. You will notice that our bands are very broad, and in fact, they tend to overlap with one another. This is because we know that there are a lot of factors that go into students comprehending texts, right? You can have a student who knows a ton about baseball, and even though they're a level 1, they might be able to comprehend a level 3 text if it's dealing with subject matter that they are really familiar with. Likewise, your level 3 might be only able to handle a level 1 if they're just not sure of what that article is about, or if they don't have any of the vocabulary. So that's why we've got quite a bit of wiggle room in there. And teachers are actually able to override placement test outcomes if they need to. And I'll show you where to do that later. Reading sprints. This is really great. It's a combination of all of our activities, and it's really cool because it's a little bit automated. So if you sign your students up for a reading sprint, they'll automatically get new assignments every Monday for however long. They could be 3 or 6 week sprints. They also are differentiated. So all of your level 2 readers will be doing the same level 2 articles, and all of your level 5 readers will be reading the same level 5 articles. That said, a downside for reading sprints is that they are not integrated with your existing curriculum, right? The articles are going to be a variety of high interest articles from around our site. Definitely great for student engagement because it's always changing, but it's not necessarily going to integrate with your class reading of Hamlet, for instance. And then if I scroll down even further, you can see that we've got bookmarks on Zinc. So if you find some content that you'd really like to teach next year, or maybe in early June, you can flag it by clicking the bookmark button, and it'll show up both here and on some individual bookmark pages. Finally, we've got a results tab at the bottom. See, these are the 3 tabs we've been going through. And you can take a look at everything you've assigned and quickly jump to the reports for each of those assignments. I'm going to go back and start talking about articles. So we've got a huge variety, I believe about 800 articles on the site. And you can search for the most appropriate article for your students. You can search by difficulty level. You can search by standard. And what we mean by this is that each article on our site is paired with a short comprehension quiz, usually 3 to 7 questions. And if I search, say, for R1 for inferencing, what I will have found are articles that have quizzes where at least one of the questions is asking students to apply the skills from R1, basically inferencing, right? So that can help me find work that will give my students the specific practice that they need depending on what standards we're working on. Similarly with skills, you can do the same thing. They align with standards, but they're a little bit more easy to access. You can search by reading time. Another big helpful way to find articles and article sets is this content category. So if I am reading To Kill a Mockingbird, where's that? I can click the title, and what I'll find is a set of articles that either historically or topically or thematically align really well with To Kill a Mockingbird. So I can go through this and maybe assign some pre-reading to give my students historical or thematic context. Maybe during reading, we have a reading of an article and then a class discussion, or afterwards for a compare-contrast essay or for further learning. These are really great. We also have these article sets set up for topics by theme, and then for a variety of different existing curricula. We've got some paired article sets. I also want to point out that we have comparison quizzes. These are really cool. They allow you to assign these existing pairs. Sometimes there are 2, sometimes we've found 3, of articles that are just thematically interesting to read in pairs. And what will happen is students will read one article, they'll take that short quiz, they'll read the other article, they'll take that short quiz, and then they will take a third short quiz that asks them to compare and contrast. It's a great way to get a lot of data on your students' understanding of compare and contrast. So let's take a look at an article. Let's do this one. Okay, so this is the teacher's view of an article. You'll see that I can click here to read an article. This will open in another tab. Here's where you assign it, and you'll see there are some different options. So if I assign it to an entire class and click Assignment Options, I will get the option to assign companion vocab games. We've gone through each article and found the 10 most relevant vocabulary words for students to learn, and you can make it so that students have to learn these vocabulary words before they read the article. You can also specify which of your students you'd like to have play those vocabulary games before reading the article. So if you have certain students who need that scaffold to be able to access that information, then you can click their names, and only they will receive those vocab games when they see their assignment. In addition, I'm going to go back to that page. You will see that there's a preview of the quiz on this page. So you'll see the skills and standards that are associated with each question. And you'll also see the questions and the options that you're given. So when a student chooses the wrong answer, there will be a pop-up that tells them why that answer is incorrect. And if they get it right, it'll also explain to them why they got it right. So if they're doing this independently at home, they're still getting that immediate feedback. They don't have to wait a day or two to get a graded quiz, and they'll get a little bit of an explanation along with it. Another thing I like to point out on this page are writing prompts. While students can't actually type the answer to these writing prompts on Zinc, although that's something that we're planning on adding next year, they do make really great conversation starters, reflective writing assignments after reading, or discussion boards. They can be really great for discussion boards as well. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like when a student actually reads an article and takes the quiz. So this is the student view of the quiz. They've opened the article, they've read the article, and now they're ready to take the quiz. What's really cool is that before they can actually see those multiple choice answers, they have to fill in a prediction of what they think the answer is going to be. This encourages them to actually think critically about what they think the correct answer is. Maybe go back into the article, take a look at what the text says. But it's also really helpful for test prep, right? Because once they get their prediction in there, they're able to look at those. Here, let me show you. Prediction here. Then they can unlock these. Then it becomes a lot more of a matching exercise rather than getting really overwhelmed by these 4 usually really possible answers. So it's a really great way for students to get in the habit of calming down and actually thinking before seeing these options. Also, students receive different amounts of points for completing article quizzes. They also get points for vocabulary games. So I'm going to go back. This is the teacher view of Zinc again. And let's take a look let's do close reading exercises. Okay, so close reading exercises are really wonderful. We've got a lot of them. They are also leveled, so you can go through and choose which ones might be appropriate for your students. They're hosted basically by individual tutors who are also young, and they talk students through a short excerpt. So I'm going to go back to my student profile and give you a demo of them in a second. I will point out that before students are able to do their first close reading exercise, they have to take a really short zinking lesson. It's set up the same way that the close reading exercises are, but it focuses on the skill that we refer to as zinking, which is really picturing what you're reading, being an active reader, which is something we see a lot of secondary readers lacking in. The navigator's lesson is very similar in that it's focused on skills. It's not required, but it's really great, helping students identify pronouns and antecedents, keywords, and punctuation as they read. So I'm going to go over to my student account. I am going to go into close reading practice, and I'm going to jump back into a close reading exercise. This one has already started, so we're jumping into the middle of it. I would have already had plenty of time to read through the excerpt a couple of times, and I just want you to see some of the questioning.
A lot of this close read will focus on tone and the way Mark Haddon, the writer, uses what's behind and between the words to make us feel his narrator, Christopher John Francis Boone's, experience. You can only taste these flavors, however, if you're zinking, turning words and phrases into pictures and sensations that come together almost like a movie in your head. So, what should we picture from the words in the first sentence? Yeah. The point is, the other answers might be true, depending on where the story takes place, but we don't have that information yet. At 7 minutes after midnight, all we know for sure is that it's dark out. Zinking is always your first move when you read. You'll also enjoy reading more if you're noticing what's interesting or unusual about the text. What's interesting or unusual about this first sentence? Well, a lot of stories start at night, right? Try again. Agreed.
Okay.
Christopher John Francis Boone,
So that gives you a little idea of how those go. There are reports that show teachers how students answered questions. There are also a few free text questions on those close reading exercises, and you can see what students entered in their report. So if you have some students who aren't necessarily taking it very seriously, you will still be able to see what they've been answering, and then maybe have a conversation with them about the benefits of, focusing on their work. So moving on to vocabulary, we can take a look at different ways to sort all of these incredible sets that we have on our site. So Zinc has created 1,500 of them. Other teachers have almost created 4,000 sets. You can also create a new set if you'd like, based on an existing list of words you have, or on another text, and I'll show you how to do that. If I search for, say, a text that I'm reading, I'm going to be able to find not only these act by act sets that Zinc has created, but also all of these other wonderful sets that teachers have made. So if you find that the Zinc version maybe is too thorough and you'd just like to have an overview, maybe check amongst what other other teachers have put together, and you'll probably find something that's perfect for you. I do want to quickly point out a couple of searches that are really great for maybe your struggling readers. The word keystone will bring up multiple sets of really great vocabulary at more of a 3rd through 5th grade level. You'll see that these words are words that students will see in their reading for the rest of their lives, but depending on the student, they might not have a great grasp of them. Maybe they don't hear these at home that much, but it's great to have some extra practice with them. Another great one is foundational. This is a little bit higher level, but similarly excellent for helping to fill in gaps for many students. And then finally, a different thing, but very useful, you can search the word Spanish. And we actually have Spanish supports for quite a few words in our library. Not all of them, although we're adding new Spanish words all the time. The way this works is that it's definitely focused on students who are fairly proficient in Spanish but need to become more proficient in English, in that the definitions and the example sentences will be in Spanish, but the word will remain in English. So if your students don't have the ability to read in Spanish, this isn't going to be very useful for them. But if they do, this can be a really nice link between the two languages and helping them to expand their English vocabulary. Quickly, I'm going to show you how you can create your own vocabulary set. So let's see. I'm going to create a set based on an article about pigeons that I'd like to read with my 10th graders. Let's see, I'm just going to put other. I can add a photo if I'd like. Now I've got two options here. I can either paste in some text and Zinc will go through and find all of the words in that text that we already have in our library, or I can manually add my own list of words. So I'm going to show you how to cut and paste and create your own list that way. So I'll go to my article and I will highlight the words in the article. So you can also do this with a PDF of a novel that you're reading in class or a short story. I'm going to paste the text in there and then click next. And Zinc goes through and finds every single word in that article that is also in our vocabulary bank. Now, if I am going through and creating my own list manually and I find that Zinc doesn't have one of the words that I'd really like my students to learn, I can absolutely go and request new words with this form over here in the corner. It usually takes us about 1 to 2 weeks to get those words into our bank, but we really encourage teachers to share what they'd like their students learning. We love adding new words to the bank. But when I'm looking through this list, it looks pretty good. I see that they've found 50 words, but as I go through, I see some words that my students definitely already know. They don't need to know neighborhood or central or previous, so I can really customize this. I can even add my own words to the list if I'd like to. So once I create this vocabulary set, I can assign it to my class. And I want to show you some of the personalizations that I can do with my class. So the defaults on vocabulary games are actually rather challenging at first, so I can remove these. There is one that forces students to restart the deck after every incorrect answer. That is awesome for learning the words really, really well, but it also might be really challenging or triggering for some students. So I can remove that for the students who maybe wouldn't respond well to that option, but I can also turn off a timer. Now, there might be some students in your class that are really motivated by a timer and they love, working on a deadline like that. Others, it might just be too much. So I can make sure that every student is getting the version of this activity that is going to be best for them. Quickly, I want to explain something that we use in our vocabulary practice, and it's called spaced repetition. Basically, we want students to be learning these words and definitions and usages for a long time. We don't just want the words going into their short-term memory, we want the words going into their long-term non-procedural memory. The way we do that is by having students play games with particular words over a certain amount of time. So I could assign a set of words to my students, and my students could play it one day. Then the set will actually lock up, and they'll need to wait a full 24 hours before they can play the set again. Once they play that set again, it'll lock up, and they'll have to wait 3 days before they're able to play the set for the third time. After that, they'll have to wait 7 days, and then 14 days, and then 28 days. So by the end, the students have taken a minimum of 2 months to go through all 6 exposures to those words and those definitions and those examples. This is going to get those words into their long-term non-procedural memory, because each time they have to access them, that information is going deeper and deeper into their brain. And we've seen just really wonderful responses to it. It can be a little bit hard for teachers to track those, so I do recommend, talking through the spaced repetition with your students ahead of time. Or if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. You can tell students to just do the vocabulary once. Let's do a quick student version of this. So I'm in the student account, and I'm going to show you this is a tiny little set of words. It's only 3 words, I think, so that it goes quickly. And it's going to show you, I believe, an obstacle course. So we've got 4 different modes of gameplay, and you'll see 3 of those 4. There's definition mode, example sentence mode, synonym mode, and image mode. The seeing eye dog blank Xiao Yang in crossing the street. Assist. So I can drag and drop.
Assist.
Demonstrate.
Demonstrate. Dedicate.
So as you can see, they're very simple games, but they work really well for different kinds of learners, and students tend to be really motivated by the points that they can earn by doing these games. Okay, so back to the teacher account. Let's take a look quickly now that you've seen the different kinds of activities on Zinc. Let's take a look again at those reading sprints. So if I'd like to assign a reading sprint, I get a bunch of different options. I can choose a comprehensive sprint, which includes close reading exercises, articles, and then the linked article vocab. And I can choose light sprints, which include just the close reading experiences. Similarly, I can choose either 6 weeks or 3 weeks. I want to point out that the 6-week sprint is less work per week than the 3-week sprint. So if you do a comprehensive 3-week sprint, that is going to be your most time-intensive option, because students are getting 9 assignments onto their dashboard every Monday, whereas the 6-week comprehensive sprint has 6 activities onto their dashboard every Monday for 6 weeks. If your students have taken a placement test recently, they won't need to take another placement test with a reading sprint. It'll just go off of their most recent placement test outcomes, and then they'll take a post-assessment as well. Again, what's so great is this automatically will differentiate for your students' different reading levels. But again, the only drawback is that it's not going to be integrated into a shared novel reading or short story or something like that. It's very much focused on reading practice, and that's also why it's pretty short, because it's really kind of like a booster reading experience. And we've seen really great outcomes from students who have used reading sprints for any length of time. So I'm going to jump into reports in a second, but first I just want to show you the leaderboard. This is what I'm talking about with points. So students earn different amounts of points for different activities. What's so great about this leaderboard is that you're not going to find necessarily your top, most competitive reader at the top, right? You are seeing students who are spending the most time on task at the top. So if you've got a student who's a struggling reader, but they are spending so much time on their vocabulary and really putting in the work, those students are going to be the ones at the top of the leaderboard. And so it's a really nice leveling of the playing field. So with reports, we've got some different options. The class usage and performance report is just going to give you a bird's eye view of what your students are up to, how they've been doing on their quizzes, how many articles they've read, and then a lot of information about points. It's a nice overview, but it doesn't necessarily give you a lot of data that's going to inform your instruction, but there are some reports that are great for that. The vocabulary report, similarly, not necessarily going to inform a lot of instruction, but it will give you information on how far each student is along in a given set. So if you have some high school sophomores who you've assigned multiple SAT prep sets to, and you say you have the quarter or you have the semester to get through all 6 exposures from this variety of sets, this is where you can go in and halfway through the semester, check in with a couple of students who might be falling behind. Or if a student is, really struggling to get started, that's another place where you'll be able to catch that. Another great report, this is actually one of my favorites, is the class assignment articles report. Now, I pointed out earlier on the quiz that each question is associated with a particular skill or standard. What's great about this report is if I am assigning a particular article to either my entire class or a small group, I can see when they finished it, I can see how they did. One thing to note is this is a 3 question quiz, and so I shouldn't look at the 67 and automatically be like, you got a D, right? This is, it's important to realize they're very short quizzes. But then I can take a look at these columns. This column represents question 1, question 2, question 3. I see that my class did pretty well, relatively well, on questions 1 and 2, but as a class struggled with question 3. I can go back and look and see which standard question 3 is associated with, and then maybe adjust my instruction or create small groups based on that. I can also see that this student was challenged by the quiz on a whole, and I can also, go back and have a conference about that experience. Another similar report, this is really great if you're doing reading sprints, because you're going to be able to see growth against different standards. So for inferencing, I can see how many total questions each student has done and how they have done on those questions. Of course, if Rosanna has only done 2 questions related to inferencing, I might not take her 100% too seriously until she's had more exposure. But the important thing to note on this report is the date range. So I can take a look at 2 weeks ago how my students were doing on inferencing, and then over the last week, or I could do week by week and take a look at growth across a reading sprint. I can also export and print almost all of these reports. Class placement test report. This is where you can actually override your students' levels if you find that they got really distracted during the placement test, or if they really rushed through it. You can adjust their level, or you can get in touch with me and I can actually create a retest for them. If you find that, like with this student, he rushed through the entire thing, this might be something that you'd want him to be able to do again. So just let me know. The way you get in touch with me, by the way, is this blue button in the corner. It usually takes roughly 12 to 24 hours for me to respond to support requests, but I do always respond. So if you don't find the answer on our help pages, please be in touch. I can answer any of your questions or request retests for your students. The final report that I'm going to point out, because the student placement test history is the same as the class placement test history, it's just for a particular student. But I'm going to point out the individual student performance report. What's important to know about this report is students have access to this report as well. They can see the leaderboard and they can see their individual reports, which will show their reading level. They can look at their placement test history. They can keep track of their articles. I can also click in here and see the actual quiz that the student filled out. That is where I can keep track of their predictions. If I find that a particular student is doing really poorly on some quizzes, I can go in and see if they're taking the predictions seriously and have a conversation about that. I can also keep track of students' progress individually on vocabulary. They can also keep track of their own progress on their vocabulary. But one of the most important parts of this report is this column on the right, the skills and standards. So, especially with your more mature, more independent students, you can have them go through and identify areas that they really need to work in. And then you can have them go and browse articles based on those standards that they need to work on and, get more practice and try and see more growth on their report. Let's see. That is really all of the things that I was planning on telling you about. Please do get in touch if there are any outstanding questions. Let's see. The last thing I'll point out is just the profile. This is where you can upload a picture, and if you are a direct user, you can adjust your password or your students' passwords. Great. Thank you so much for your time. Please be in touch if you have any questions, and thank you so much for using Zinc.